The world is changing fast, and so are the local real estate markets. Don't worry, though. We've got you covered. Welcome to the Real Estate Revolution.
This is the Real Estate Revolution podcast. I am Kip Lohr, your host, and we are here at the Home and Garden Show, sponsored by the Central Oregon Home Builders Association. And we have done some great interviews here. You're going to notice today that, again, Ryan Neal, our co-host, is on hiatus, so we're not going to have a market report today, but we do have a really great guest in, and his name is Mike Wilson. He is with Central Oregon Inspection Services, and he and I are going to get into the down and dirty of crawling in the crawl spaces and letting you guys know what's really important to be looking at when you're getting your home inspected. And so with no further ado, let's just bring on Mike. Welcome back to the Real Estate Revolution podcast. I am Kip Lohr, your host with Lohr Real Estate. We are at the Home and Garden Show. It is put on by COBA, the Central Oregon Association of Builders. We are really appreciative of their efforts here. This has been a great show so far. It's day 2. Actually, we're almost running into the end of day 2. And I got to tell you, it's been a couple of years since we've been able to do this show, and it's really been a great show so far. There's some great vendors down here. Please come down and visit the vendors. If you can't make it today, it's on again tomorrow, 10 to 4. And it's just been a great show so far. I have the privilege to have, the privilege. You know, I mean, Mike, you and I have been at it a long time together, and I've been trying to get you to do this with me for some time.
Years.
This is Mike Wilson with Central Oregon Home Inspections.
Correction, Central Oregon Inspection Services.
Thank you.
He's done that before, but
Central,
it's okay.
Central
Fred,
Oregon Inspection Services. I stand corrected, which, I thank you for doing that. But anyway, long story short, listen, we've been at it a long time together. I would trust my buyers with, any of my clients with no one other than you. I mean, I let my clients make their decision, but you are the guy. You've been at it a long time. You were the president of the, remind me,
Central Oregon Association of Real Estate Inspectors.
There you go. You were Corey. For 10 years, right?
Well, about 10 of the last 25 years.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe 8.
Long story short, this guy knows his stuff. But before we start talking about your business and talk about home inspections, because what we'd like to do today is kind of give people a better understanding of what the process is like. Is it important? Is it not important? These kinds of things, some kind of, pitfalls that people decide not to do them, and what's trending right now. What are you finding out there that people need to be watching out for when they're doing this? But let's get to know Mike a little bit first.
Mike Wilson, Central Oregon Inspection Services. By the way, Fred Woodworth, a good friend of mine, was Central Oregon Home Inspections, and he's recently retired from
okay.
And we have been confused a lot of times.
I'm sure.
We've taken each other's calls over the years.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, no, I thank you for pointing that out. I'll get it right next time.
Thank you. Really not a deal at all.
No,
I even deposit checks made out to the wrong company.
I love it.
So anyway, I'm Mike Wilson. I came here with my wife about 27 years ago from the Portland area, built a house up in Terrebonne.
Yep.
That is where I have been since, and I just fell in love with the place. Came over to Central Oregon to build my mom and dad a house.
Wow.
And that was in 95, 96.
Okay.
And just fell in love with it, bought a lot, built a house, and that's where I still am.
And you've been at it ever since.
I've been at it ever since. So I've been a general contractor since 1991. I've been doing home inspections here in Central Oregon since I got here in the late 90s. So
wow.
Yeah, my inspector number is 122. I was the 122nd person to be an inspector in the state of Oregon, at least certified. So
that is crazy. That's great.
I pride myself on
being ground. You started at the ground level.
Yeah, indeed, I did.
Yeah,
yep. And it's been a blast. It's not the. Yeah, it's an interesting business. It's evolving a little bit. 25 years ago, I would say 10 to 20% of the homes were being inspected in Central Oregon. Now most are, with the exception of this crazy market, and people are, for some crazy reason, not having inspections done. But,
which we'll talk about for sure.
We'll talk about that. So anyway, that's me. I pride myself on trying to be the best there is, and I research stuff when I don't know. When new things come along, you have to be prepared. So
yeah, and let me tell you another difference about you versus a lot of the new young bucks. And I'm not going to disparage the young bucks, but there is a different, like when I started in real estate, so I've been at, about 30 years, and, the real estate contract was an 8.5 by 11, in quadruple it.
Right, right.
You had to press really
Right,
hard with the
yes.
pen, and then we were really, bummed out when it went to legal size. So the industry has changed a lot since I've been in the, I started, and we had to be appraisers. We had to be, we had to be everything when I first started in the real estate business. And for you to have construction, your a construction contractor background gives you a completely different set of lenses into your inspections, where a lot of these guys are coming into the industry where they really don't have a whole lot of I haven't swung a hammer. I don't necessarily understand how these systems are put together. And so I'm not saying that these guys aren't good inspectors. I'm just saying when you have the privilege of working with somebody who knows from the ground up how this stuff is supposed to go together, and you take the time to explain to your client, hey, this is why this is the way it is. And hey, one thing that I experience as a real estate agent is you get an inspection report, you got red ink, and you got red ink, and you got red ink, and everything's like red alert, and it gets the buyers or the clients really scared about stuff without really understanding, well, this isn't really that big of a deal, or this is pretty normal for this age of a house. And you're willing to step up and be able to say, okay, these are pretty, this house was built in 1940, and for a 1940s house, fill in the blank. This is fairly normal, or this is actually, you know what I'm saying?
It's critical that people keep things in perspective.
Yes.
Yes, the red ink and everything is not an emergency.
Right.
I like to tell people, if you could read my last 100 inspection reports, you would see that this house is just the same as all the other ones. Every house has 128 problems, or whatever the thing might be.
Yeah.
And anyway, keeping everything in perspective is key.
But I think educating your clients through that process is really one of the ways that you shine above a lot of other guys out there, where you're willing to take the time with your client and really it's not about making them at ease, it's about helping them have a deeper understanding of what they're looking at,
what's important, what needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
I pride myself, from what I've heard, I haven't been on too many inspections with other inspectors, but I enjoy buyers when the conditions are right to come and experience it with me.
Yeah.
Follow me through the house, look things over with me. I like to teach people about stuff. I like people to understand what this means.
Yeah.
You're going to read it in a report, but if we can have a 10-minute conversation about it, you're really going to understand this needs to be taken care of, this is significant, this is a safety issue, or it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. It's something to watch out for, and let's do something.
It's just critical to, digesting a home inspection report is not easy, especially for a first-time buyer or a second-time buyer, or especially for the second-time buyer who had a crappy inspector the first time around, which happens, and you get all this information. My job, in general, the way I look at the whole process.
Let's talk about your philosophy.
My philosophy is I want the buyer to know everything they can about the house. I want them to know about the broken doorknob and the master bedroom. Yeah. And that don't close it behind you because you're not going to get out of the master bedroom. It's not a big deal. It's a $15 doorknob. But I still want you to know that.
Yeah.
We don't have to report on those kind of things. But of course, the real process, the purpose is identifying those big issues.
Yeah.
The roof issues, the moldy attics, the rotted bathroom floor, the siding that was recalled, or not recalled. Yeah. The siding was recalled. Anyway.
Yeah.
I like a lot of reports. I read a lot of reports, and I see that they're minimal, and I'm wondering why I'm not seeing more of the detail. And so I just and knowing everything there is to know about this house before you sign on the dotted line, now you know. Yeah. There's not going to be any surprises. I don't want you to move in and find out from Uncle Ted that he thinks I missed something. I want to tell you. And I will just list observations in the report. This doesn't need anything, but there's a crack in the ceiling of your garage.
Yeah, that's what I love about your reports.
It's just, keeping it in perspective. And on the real things, you have to know the real things. This needs to be taken care of. Yeah. Your roof's going to leak or whatever. So,
yeah, but what's interesting about you and your reports is you're not going to just say your roof's leaking. Right. You're gonna tell them why the roof's leaking and where the roof's leaking. Right.
And does that mean the roof has to be replaced, or can we just fix this?
Is there a repair? Exactly. Yeah. And so it's all in the context, right? That's really important about a lot of this stuff.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the ways that you stand out of the crowd as far as I'm concerned, because we don't. I obviously will recommend you, but I also don't make. My clients need to make their own decisions.
Absolutely.
and I give them an educated, synopsis of the differences between the different people that I recommend, and then they make their own decision. But I would say, I guess one thing that would be interesting is obviously Central Oregon has its own particular like things. Like I have an office in Eugene, so you do an inspection in Eugene versus you do an inspection in Central Oregon. There's different things that you need to be looking for a little more carefully, right? Like in Eugene, we have a lot of water under the house issues, which we don't have as much here. I mean, you might find it occasionally, but it's pretty rare. What are some of the things that are really kind of quintessential things that you find on a pretty regular basis here in Central Oregon?
In Central Oregon, the colder climate, the higher elevation certainly is something that is completely different than the Eugene area. We talk in each town. Prineville has issues with moisture under the ground, under the houses. The ground in Prineville, for example, downtown Prineville, is very wet. You can dig, you can hit a well, you can hit water digging 5 feet down in the ground there, and so the soil is very damp. It's very different than Bend. It's very different than Redmond. And then you get down to Sun River, and that soil drains so well. There's never moisture under the house. That sandy soil. But one of the biggest issues that I see in Central Oregon is a misunderstanding of what causes mold in attic spaces. I can't tell you how many times a week I find mold in attic spaces. And it's because of the temperature differentials that we have. Warm attic spaces, poorly ventilated attic spaces with a cold outdoor temperature. The greater that temperature is in the attic versus the outside temperature, you're going to get condensation. Any moisture in the air is going to condense out on the cold roof. And in Central Oregon, we love to use ridge vents. And I'll tell everybody in the world that ridge vents just are not ideal for a climate where you get snow.
Because it plugs them up.
Well, you get 6 inches of snow on a roof, and your ridge vent is completely useless.
Right.
And there's no more important time to get moisture out of your attic space than when your roof is covered with snow. You have to get that moisture out, because if you don't, it just condenses on the roof sheathing, and that's why we in Central Oregon, there's more mold in the attics probably than over in Portland.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a crazy thing that people just don't get. I wish that some of the builders in Central Oregon have really understood that and are beefing up their efforts to provide proper ventilation, but many are not, and it's an interesting oversight in the construction process. But with that being said, I mean, that's just something that has to be evaluated, has to be taken care of. Usually, it's a relatively quick and painless repair, but that's one of the biggest ones that I see in Central Oregon that is a recurring issue is poor attic ventilation resulting in moldy attic spaces.
Right, and so when the MOLD word, the 4-letter word of mold, gets uttered, people,
oh, it's
black
terrible.
mold.
Oh, 10, 15
Oh my gosh.
10, 15 years ago, it was a 4-letter word, and people were terrified. We're all going to die of some mold inhalation problems.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. Mold to me is a beautiful thing in that it indicates, it tells the world that there's a problem.
Right.
We have a problem that you need to fix. It's just an indicator.
It's the canary in the mind.
And you catch it early enough. It's really taking care of mold isn't a big deal. You treat it and you encapsulate it. It's a pretty easy process. There's a few companies, one in particular here in Central Oregon.
Go ahead and give them a prop.
Mountain Air. They're great people. I've followed them 20 times up in attics after they've got done in the re-inspection process, and they just do a fantastic job. They understand airflow, they understand ventilation better than anybody in Central Oregon. They do a great job. So
they know their stuff.
It's always a pleasure when I know they're the ones taking care of it.
Yeah,
and it isn't nearly as expensive as catastrophic as people think it is.
So do we have black mold here in Central Oregon?
Well,
is that something that
the term
toxic mold?
You can have the toxic mold virtually anywhere.
Right.
Most mold that you see in attic spaces is black.
Right.
Period. So yes, I can say we have black mold.
We have black mold. Right. But it was a dumb question, but
one of the things I try to teach people when I come out of an attic and show them pictures of all the mold up there, you're not living up there, you're not breathing it.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to tell you that your attic is full of fiberglass.
Yeah.
If you breathe that every day, you're going to die
great.
before the mold. But so unless the mold is in your house growing, and the number of times I've seen mold inside the walls of the house, that was problematic and a health problem has been pretty rare. Most people won't allow their house to get moldy enough to cause a health problem. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah,
the mold up in the attic spaces, you're not breathing that air. That air does not exchange with the air in our house, so that doesn't pose any health hazard. Moisture issues underneath the house, those certainly can be even more problematic for the interior of the house because more air will come up from underneath the house. But it's it needs to be understood and it needs to be addressed. It doesn't need to be feared.
Right.
Yes.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else is out there right now that you think people need to be aware of as far as like things that are coming up on your inspection reports that you think?
It's a tough question, but one recently, it just seems like I've been on a spree here the last month or two with a whole lot of roofs that just seem to be wearing out. Here in Central Oregon, the sun just destroys the south sides of our roofs well before the north side. And there was a manufacturer or two out there that had issues with granule adhesion.
Yeah.
And so just did a place a few days ago, the south side, there was almost no granules left on the roof.
Wow.
And that was a product that was probably involved in a lawsuit and or a settlement of some sort. Certainty it was a manufacturer, but that period apparently is ended, which is unfortunate for anybody that has those roofs. But it's really important. One key indicator is if you live in a neighborhood, or if you're looking at houses in a 20-year neighborhood, and 9 out of 10 of them have a new roof, something's wrong. And by that I mean roofs don't fail here in Central Oregon.
10 years.
Yeah, I mean, in 20 years, I was saying, or 15 years. If you notice, in Central Oregon, roofs should last typically 25 to 30 years. Most of the shingles that have been put on the last 20, 30 years are 25 or 30-year laminated shingle roofs.
Right.
And they're lasting pretty well with a couple exceptions, but I'm just saying that if you're buying a 20-year-old house and all your neighbors have new roofs, then there's a problem with those roofs because they shouldn't need to be replaced yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good
and,
trick.
Yeah. I was on top of this house a couple days ago, and you could look around the neighborhood. Everybody had a new roof except this house. And it was a 20-year-old house or 21-year-old house.
And you're like, okay.
They missed the window.
They missed, Well,
that's one thing. Anyway,
keeping on roofs, like here in Central Oregon, one of the things that, I mean, I think one of the misnomers here is we just don't get as much snow as we used to, number one, and maybe as much as people from out of area like envision, right? But we do still get snow. And when we do, ice damming can happen.
Ice dams, that's a big one.
Yeah. And so what I've noticed is there was kind of an age range of houses before the building code changed and required that kind of ice dam protection.
Ice and water shield, yes.
Yep.
Interesting point on that. Ice and water shield. I built my house in 96 in Terrebonne. Code required ice and water shield in 1996 when I built my house.
Okay.
And so it's not something new.
Right.
It wasn't standard practice for it to be installed all the time, nor was it standard practice for the building officials to make certain that it was being installed.
So what you're saying is the code existed.
It wasn't enforced.
But it was not enforced.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would say at least half the houses built in the last 20 years don't have ice and water shield, and the code always required it.
Wow, that's another good bit of information because that can be a problem.
Understanding ice dams. 3 years ago, maybe. Was it 3 years? 4 years?
I think it was 4 years ago.
4 years ago, and then
We're
2 years
old,
before
man.
that. I don't know. 4 years ago fast. We had unusual weather conditions that resulted in really thick ice dams. Those weather conditions were a lot of snow, a couple of feet of snow, and cool temperatures that did not get above freezing for the better part of 30 days in bed.
Right. So the heat leaving the house was melting the layer, underneath the snow. During the day, especially
the ridge vents and the upper vents, whatever you want to call the upper type of vents that you have, they were all covered with snow. Right. So none of the heat could get out of our attic spaces. So that heat went to melting the snow. The snow came down the roofs and froze on the eaves, and that went on for 30 plus days straight. It just kept getting thicker and thicker and thicker. And normally in Central Oregon, at least a couple days a week, you're going to get up to 40 degrees.
Yep.
And that bond between the ice and the roof is going to break, and that's going to allow the water. So the dynamics of the ice dam. You've got the ice building up on the eaves.
Yep.
The water's coming down from your hot attic space, and it's literally pooling. It's pooling behind that ice, and it works its way up underneath the shingles, and that's what the leaks were caused from.
Exactly.
Now, when you break that bond between the ice and the roof on a 40-degree day, that water can drain out.
Yep.
The water can drain out.
Bring it in there.
And so that's the mechanics behind it. So what prevents ice dams? One thing, of course, is a well-ventilated attic space. I will tell everybody in the world that a 31-degree attic will not have ice dam issues because a 31-degree attic won't be melting snow on your roof.
That's right.
And so a well-ventilated attic, you're not going to get a 31-degree attic probably, but you can have a 40-degree attic. But you don't want a 70-degree.
Right.
And
in the winter.
And here in the wintertime, I'm telling you, I'm up in attic spaces. There's 2 feet of snow on the roof, and the attic's 60 degrees. It's like because there's no heat getting out of the attic space. So ventilation is just critical. Understanding how to get air out of the attic space when your roof is covered with snow is really pretty simple.
Yeah.
If it's a gable roof with vertical gable walls, you put gable vents in, you're not going to ever have an ice dam issue. There's an entire neighborhood in Central Oregon, Providence.
Yep.
Providence had the lowest occurrence rate with ice dam issues
Because it had gable.
Every house in that neighborhood, except the ones that were built in the last few years in that development,
Yep.
are
We're gable.
gable vents. And
Yep.
they had no ice
The
dam
best vent
issues.
ever.
And you get up in those after 25 years, and there's no moisture issues,
mold,
there's no mold,
yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
organic growth.
Yeah. Organic
Anyway,
growth.
so
yeah.
the other thing, of course, that with ice dams, knowing that you probably don't have the proper ice and water shield on your roof, ice melt cable is the solution. You see that all around Central Oregon on some people's roofs.
Yep.
I, as an inspector, go and I see ice melt cable on a roof, and I question: was this done preventively, or was it a response to an issue? Or,
Right. Right.
But anyway,
Well, human nature. It was probably a response to an issue.
Almost
like
always.
people do not.
people are more reactive than proactive. That's for sure.
Yes, totally.
Especially when it comes.
That's
to
right. If
home
it ain't broke, don't
Yeah.
fix it.
Sheesh.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
boy.
don't call anybody until it's spinning out into the universe.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. But the ice melt cable is a guaranteed way to prevent the buildup of
So
ice.
there's your first tip, everybody. Mike is saying, hey, here in Central Oregon, get some ice belt cable
If-
on your roof.
Depending on the roof and depending on if you've had issues or
Yeah.
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 Another thing is, if we do end up with that crazy snowmageddon year next year with 4 feet of snow on our roofs
Yep.
and ice cold temperatures for 3 weeks, you
Yep.
start seeing the ice build up. Keep your house cooler. Put on a sweater. Turn your thermostat down.
Got
The
it.
warmer your house is, the thicker your ice dam is.
Got it.
More snow that melts off your roof freezes at the eaves. So,
Totally
yeah.
makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there any mitigation? I mean, do you get the snow rake and pull the snow off your roof?
Snow rakes can certainly be beneficial and helpful,
Yeah.
especially if it's sometimes, yes.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, a
okay.
lot of people here use snow rakes because they fear their roof can't handle the snow loads. And that is certainly the case with some homes. It is not the case with almost every home built in the last 20 years that has engineered trusses and whatnot. So people that are afraid of the snow weight, probably less of a concern. Now, if you're in an older manufactured home, absolutely get the snow off your roof.
Yeah.
If you're, and most people do that anyway. But
Yeah. So,
it should be unnecessary to answer your question.
Yeah, I
Remove
get
the snow on a 20-year-old typical 1,800 square foot house in Bend, Oregon. Just should be unnecessary.
okay, good to know. So, what about pests? What are the local pests here in Central Oregon that you're finding? Like,
I find mice in almost every home I inspect.
really?
So everybody thinks they don't have mice. They did at one time, because I find mice droppings virtually
In every house,
Virtually every
regardless,
house.
regardless of any price point.
I tell everybody they should always maintain traps underneath their house or maybe in the attic. So
You're saying Northwest Crossing houses have mice?
they do. They do indeed. And it's unfortunate. And one thing that I could say is if you're having work done to your house,
Yeah.
if you're having an air conditioner put in, or you're anything happening, plumbing changes underneath the house, those damaged vent screens and your foundation vents, that's where the mice are coming from.
Right.
And a brand new house, they run the condensate line from the indoor coil
Right through
the
the
screen.
foundation
All
line,
it takes is a little hole the size of a dime, and you're going to have mice. So make certain that those get sealed up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these are the types of things that you're looking for.
Always, yeah. So, maintain traps.
Yep.
Check your foundation.
So you're finding mice. What else are you finding out there as far as pesties go?
pack rats in Central Oregon, especially.
rats, really?
Yes. They're especially in the more rural areas outside of town a little bit.
Yeah.
They're a huge problem, and everybody that lives outside of town, they know that.
Yeah,
They have a
Eugene area. I mean, like you said, mice in every house. Every house in Eugene has rat problems.
rat problems. Wow.
Rat. Yeah.
Well, these rats that we have here, they're this stinky, gross little creatures, I will tell you. And they're called pack rats because, well, my understanding of why they're called pack rats is because they pack stuff in. They build nests under houses out of everything they can find, from string to shoelaces to
Bubblegum wrappers.
everything.
Yeah.
And they just make mounds, and then they build their nests inside these mounds.
Yeah.
And they're just really smelly creatures. So they need a much larger hole. They need something that's a couple inches in diameter to get into your house. And pack rats are a creature that can be large. They can be 18 inches long, or they can be 4 inches long. So they live anyway. Yeah. Pack rats are an issue. You get down into the pine trees. You get out to Sisters. You get down to Sun River. You get down to La Pine. Squirrels and chipmunks are a huge problem underneath houses, especially guest house or
like
vacation
vacation
rentals.
homes. Yeah.
Yes, where that aren't permanently occupied.
Yeah.
They get into attics. I've seen them cause $10,000-$15,000 worth of damage. So
Wow.
make certain that if you're seeing squirrels on your roof,
They're probably living in your.
they're getting underneath your eaves somewhere, and they're going. Yeah. So when the roof is covered with snow, is a fantastic time to look for those tracks, because if you've got tracks across your roof up underneath an eave somewhere, you need to deal with it. It's a big deal.
Okay, that's good to know. What about insects? What are the common buggies that we have here in Central Oregon?
The western subterranean termite is our only real wood-destroying or wood-eating insect, and they're extremely common in Central Oregon. Anywhere there's juniper trees, we have termites. It's just a fact, and that's something very much misunderstood by most people in Central Oregon. I find termites all the time. Now, the termites that we have are not very. It's really rare to see them cause structural damage. They will nibble along. If you allow the dirt to come up and cover the bottom of your siding for a year or 2 or 3 or 4,
They'll come up.
They're going to get up and nibble on the bottom of the siding. It's unlikely that they're going to come in and
make a home.
Yeah. Well, they don't make their homes in your house. They're coming up for a food source. They live in the ground. Unlike other animals, like carpenters, actually live in the house.
Yeah.
But the termites live in the ground. So it's really critical that you don't allow the dirt to collect up against the siding or posts, or decks. And the most common spot to see termite damage is to 4x4 posts underneath the decks that have been buried in the dirt for 20 years. Yeah. Underneath the house, wood form boards get left behind around concrete piers, and the termites nibble those up. And I say, cool, they're getting rid of the wood for us. Almost never will you see
them up into the structure
result in damage to your home. It's almost never, and I've been doing this a lot of years. I've got pictures of thousands of termite activity incidences, and very few of them require any structural change. Usually the solution to termite problems in Central Oregon is correcting the conducive condition. Get the dirt away from the house.
Get the food sources away from
pull the boards
access.
If I'm underneath the house and the cardboard or the wood form boards are still in place, the right thing is to do to remove them. But I will tell you, it's not an emergency.
Right.
They came in. They might have came in 15 years ago, for all we know.
That's right.
So, it's not totally a gigantic thing. Carpenter ants are anywhere you've got the pine trees, and they often build little satellite nests within the house. Not in the house, not in the bedroom, but in the wall cavities, behind the siding, under the eaves. And again, it's pretty rare to see any real problems caused with that. You want them out, so the perimeter treatment is the solution there to keep them from
coming and going.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So why don't we shift gears to talking a little bit about giving folks that are going to hire a home inspector kind of a to Z expectation of what the process is like for them, from the intake that you do to get hired to, okay, this is what they can expect from the process of the actual inspection, and then the debrief on the report and what your report kind of looks like.
That could be a 3.5 day conversation right there.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it. We might need another beer, but let's do it again. So let's get started with, hey, I'm Mike, and Kip, Laura Real Estate said I should give you a call and give you a shot at a home inspection. What are they going to expect from the interaction with you?
The first thing I like to tell people is do your homework. Try to figure out, do a little bit of research. What is a good home inspection? What is a home? Understanding, what do I bring to the table? What does any home inspector bring to the table? Why are we here? Yeah. And my entire job is to teach people about what they're buying. Not necessarily teaching them, but to inform them what they're buying. I'm going to tell you you've got a broken doorknob. That's not critical. I'm going to tell you your roof is in typical condition for a 15-year roof, or it's got too many granules. So how is a person going to present that information to you, I think is really important. So
I agree.
When that person first makes a phone call to me, some people are they just want to set up an appointment. They just want me to do it. They've made up their decision. Other times people are calling and kind of want to
interview you a little bit.
Yes, and I will tell you this, that those people that do call and do the interview on the phone don't know the right questions to ask.
So let's hear them.
That's a tough one. I just said that off the spur of my.
Like
I should know the answers to that. But, one of the questions is, how long have you been doing this?
Right.
What's your background?
Yeah.
Will you report on this? I mean.
Yeah.
Will you inform me about lesser items, or are you just looking at the big giant things?
Yeah.
I think what's your background is probably one of the most important ones.
Yeah.
There are educators in not in Central, but in Oregon that will, you can go take a week or 2 or 3 class and become a home inspector.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's the best approach. Yep. I mean, they're basically teaching you what your minimum standards of a home inspection are pretty minimal. If you read the standards of practice that accompanies every home inspection report, you will see that to test a furnace, all we're required as home inspectors in Oregon to do is to turn on the thermostat and see if the furnace turns on. That's all we have to do. That's the minimum standard. So asking somebody if they're a minimum standards inspector,
That's a pretty good question.
Which some real estate agents, not Mr. Lohr for certain, actually prefer the minimum standards inspectors. Those are the guys that just do the bare minimum, and they make their,
because they want to blow through the inspection.
They make their,
they don't want to deal killed.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw this out there real quick. Kip and I have been working together for years, and the people that do use me understand what I bring to the table, and that is excellence in what I do. I want you to know everything. And agents that don't want that, I would be leery of.
100%.
And like every business, there's some that are better than others. There's a lot of agents, I think, that don't really understand what my purpose is.
And so you kind of get what you pay for to some degree, but you also get what you are willing to put into it. And if you're not willing to put a little effort into finding the right person and maybe doing a little Googling to understand the process a little bit better so you know what questions to ask, you kind of get stuck with somebody who's going to be the minimum standards kind of guy. And I know, the reason you and I have worked together for so long is we're not minimum standards guys. There's a right way and there's a wrong way, and you're on one side of that or the other as far as I'm concerned. So
I agree.
Yeah.
And there's some gray areas with some specific topics for sure, but I don't think that anybody can know too much about a house before they make their decision to buy it or to not buy it. It's how that information is interpreted and what your expectations are on the presentation of the information, I think, are key to a great agent can get a very thorough home inspection report to a client and explain to them exactly what we're talking about, what's important, what's not important. Understanding is so critical for buyers, especially first-time buyers, to understand that just because I say GFI doesn't work doesn't mean anybody has to fix anything.
Right.
I'm just letting you know you're buying a house with a broken GFI.
Exactly.
And the same thing with everything else in the comment in the report. Now, the biggest purpose of my job, besides telling everybody what's wrong with their house that they're about to buy,
or what's right with their house.
Oh, absolutely. My report, it's really funny because if I've it's an interesting point that you just made. Because if you read one of my reports,
I have read many of your reports.
It's going to say that there's like 500 things that are good.
Yeah.
And there might be 100 things that are wrong, but nobody takes into account that little X and the G box, the good box.
That's good, yeah.
That means that this kitchen sink is good. And people say, why don't you ever say anything good about the house?
Well, it's like, I just checked a whole bunch of boxes. You do more than that, though, Mike. There are times when you literally put in the notes that this is like above standard, or this was like a really well put together fill in the blank.
It's important to understand. Okay, I'm buying a house with a 50-year roof. This is the best roof that money could buy.
Yep.
Or this was a great upgrade. Or you have no idea. This is the best crawl space.
You do not know how. That's another thing. This was the cleanest crawl spaces I've ever walked through.
And that's important. Like I think it's what's interesting is I'll go do an inspection and the deck will have a few issues, maybe $1,000 worth of repairs on the deck. But then I'll come out of the crawl space and tell them that it's a 4-foot tall crawl space that's just perfect condition. And to me, that's
tidy as a pin.
To me, that outweighs all the other crap I could
Well, you are crawling through it though, Mike, and you're a big guy, so you do have a particular appreciation for a good put together crawl space. But there's also a certain level of, you could tell when there's been a tension either in the construction process that is a little uncommon and is like, if this is good, I feel really good about this house, right? Like, so the crawl space is one of those areas where if it's a disaster area, there's two things that have gone on. Either the original contractor left a bunch of crap behind that's been rotting underneath there for 30 years, or the homeowners that have owned the home have not done their own maintenance along the way, right? And when you go into a place where you can get a good combination of the builder did a good job and then the homeowner took a good care of it, you take the time to note that.
It's critical. It's critical that people understand the good things. And plus, hopefully, they will understand, so I'm supposed to keep my crawl space clean, or I'm supposed to keep this
and
up.
Here's why. It doesn't attract the pack rats and the termites.
I will tell you, the well-maintained home is becoming less common than they used to be, I think.
I think you're right about
I
that.
will say this though, with the market that we're in now, it's really nice to see all this money being put into real estate, not real estate, into homes,
into improving,
structures.
yeah,
Yes,
improving the
this is a
structures, yeah.
fantastic time in history it's the best time in history in my life to improve a lot of cruddy old buildings that need
I
help.
totally agree
Yep.
with that. Yeah, and I think the old mill houses on the west side were kind of the first line of that, where we're getting plumbing systems that are updated and electrical systems that are updated, but then above and beyond that, there's all these other 90s vintage houses that you're talking about that I feel old when I start, because I think 90s and I feel like that's not that long ago, and it's like
I'm doing inspections on houses I inspected 25 years ago that were new then, and now they need new roofs. And I'm thinking, oh man, it might be time to retire.
It might be time to retire. Well, don't retire yet. And you need to keep me up on that, because maybe we'll go out together.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, listen, we could probably talk for another hour.
At least.
So what my proposition to you is maybe let's have you back for another episode and continue to educate people, because I think, this is a topic that is really important for people, both buyers and sellers, to understand the process and the things that are important. I know that we've left a lot of topics on the table. So what it means is you're stuck having to come back and talk to me again.
I'd make time for it. I'd appreciate it, Kip. It's fun talking with you.
I'd love it.
And I think there's a lot of things that the world needs to know out there about this process.
I agree. So anyway, why don't we call it a day? And I appreciate you for coming today. And you guys can look forward to seeing Mike again on a podcast. I will pull teeth and bend elbows if I have to, maybe a couple more beers. And in the meantime, thanks again.
Just going to take a beer. Thanks, Kip.
Fair enough.
Kip, it's always a pleasure working with you.
Same, Mike.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining The Revolution. We are over and out until next week, when we'll continue to fill you in on all that matters most in our local Bend and Eugene real estate scenes. See you next time on The Real Estate Revolution.